I never heard of naturopathic medicine growing up. I was 30 years between New York and New Jersey. Anything's possible. Like we're not stuck in one way, shape, or form of doing things. It can feel like there isn't a way through. But it does take patience and grace. And I believe a deep, deep desire to live. The wisdom of our bodies is so profound. When the wisdom can actually come up and be given space, the body does miraculous things.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Seeds of Elegance. This is an interview series with people who are approaching health, wealth, and well-being for individuals and our collective in alternative ways. And today I have with us Dr. Eva Yacobi. She's a naturopathic doctor, self-intimacy and women's empowerment coach, and also trained with me in a year-long certification in Vita, love, sex, and relationships. And I just want to mention my typical note here. Seeds of Elegance comes from my organization, Elegance Lab. We are focused here on creativity, on embodiment, on systems innovation. As I mentioned, I am looking at ways in which health, wealth, and well-being can be embodied individually within us, collectively, and in our institutions. And I also work with individuals who I call mischief makers, who want to challenge the rules of how things are in our world and shape it to be richer. So, Dr. Eva Yacobi, I'm so grateful to have you here. And I know it's evening for you as you're calling in from Bali.
Yes. So good to be here.
So I would love to know, what is the journey? I want to know about two different journeys and if they intersect, because multiple journeys in our life do intersect, but sometimes they are completely random. So the first journey I want to know about is where you were born on this planet and how you ended up in Bali. And then the second is how you got into naturopathic medicine. And then
Okay.
we'll get to the third journey we're going to talk about, which is going from naturopathic medicine into self-intimacy work. So we're going to cover three journeys here today, but let's start with the first two.
Uh-huh. Okay. So yeah, I was born in Illinois, grew up in New York, not in Manhattan, just outside of Manhattan. And, was in the New York, New Jersey area for most of my life, until I was 30. And um, talking about weaving it together, my intention was to go to medical school when I was coming out of undergrad, but I didn't end up going, and I know we'll get to that. And I ended up following a very windy journey found myself in corporate America. And when I turned 30, I just said, I'm done with this. This is just not for me. So I left the States, I went to Israel, and then I went to Southeast Asia. And, I did this. I had the opportunity to travel, and what was supposed to be 1 month backpacking by myself turned into 4 months. And, it was the loop, which is like Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia. And then I was in Cambodia and I was sitting on the beach, and I can still see it in my mind. I said, you know what? I'm so close to Bali. Like I didn't have much time left. I'm like, I have 2 weeks. I'm going to go to Bali. And so this was 2013. And so I came to Bali, and at that time, I actually submitted my applications for naturopathic medical school. Again, we'll get into that. But it was when I did that, I promised myself, once I'm done with school, I'm coming back to Bali. And this is where I've wanted to live since literally 2013. So I'm just so grateful to say I am living in Bali as a naturopathic doctor now, because that was my dream, since the first time I landed on this island.
So powerful. And it's interesting because we actually don't know as much about each other, but I was raised in Queens and live in the Midwest. And I'm very curious about, I love to get at the pieces of our own story that paved the way for the work that we're doing in the world. And oftentimes that is much more intimate and close to our identity and our heart than it is to I applied to XYZ college, you know, to the things that we write on the resume and we write on the website. And so you mentioned also going to Israel. Your last name's Yacobi. You grew up in New York. Like, can I know a little bit about your parents' backgrounds as well? What type of home were you growing up in? Because going from being raised in New York City as well to then getting into naturopathic medicine is not impossible, but I'll just say when I want to be out there, I go to the West Coast and I go
Yes.
not back to the East Coast.
It's so true. And I never thought about it like that. It's so funny. Yeah, so my father's originally from Iran. He left when he was 17, went to Israel. My mom was originally from Canada. She left when she was 17, went to Israel. So they met in Israel. You know, my dad's side is this Iranian, Iraqi, Kurdish mix. And then my mom's side is, you know, she was born in Canada, but Swiss Slovakian. So there's just a lot going on in my DNA and in my bloodlines. Big family on both sides, but then, you know, my father pursued a PhD that led him to the US, well, led my parents to the US, and that's how we ended up in the US. Just following his career path, basically. And yeah, and then how does that tie to naturopathic medicine? Because, you know, like I said, I was planning on going to conventional medicine, and, you know, I was pre-med. My bachelor's was in biology, and I did all the things. I shadowed doctors. I volunteered in the ER. I did all these things, right? I also talked to a lot of doctors, and none of them were urging me to go to medical school. None of them. They were doing well financially, but they were not saying this is the path I recommend. And I heard that. And not only that, there was something inside of me. I was scared. I will fully admit that I was really fearful to go because I didn't think I would thrive. I just was nervous about how that would impact me. But I also didn't really believe in the medicine entirely, not enough. That's the true form of medicine that I can dedicate my life to. Now, I didn't know about any other forms of medicine, so that that went out the window, and I spent 10 years doing all sorts of random things. But that's why I walked away. I had applied to schools, I took the MCAT, I had interviews, and I just canceled the interviews and said, I'm done.
What was the doubt like, if you don't mind me asking? And I want to just name this because I talk about intuition a lot in this place, since we're talking about embodiment and we're talking about things that are often in the unseen and in the intangible. And there's one thing when you get a list of A, B, C, D in life and you're like, oh yeah, it's not A, B, C, I'll choose D. And then it's another thing when you're like, I don't see other options, but this is not it. So like you didn't know of alternative medicines, but something in you, when you say this, feel like the medicine that you could give your life to.
Yeah.
Was there anything in particular that had sown that for you, or was it just a deeper intuition, or were there things you saw other than just the doctors themselves not encouraging you? Were there things that turned you off?
I think a big contributing factor is, so when I was 16, I became anorexic. When I was 17, I ended up in the hospital, 3 weeks inpatient, 5 weeks outpatient. So I was kind of in the system for, it was at least that 8 weeks. And I saw the insides of the hospital. I saw how we were treated, right? It was a children's hospital, at least the children's wing. But like, I saw how nutrition was addressed, which didn't make sense to me at all, right? Yes, did it help me move beyond where I was? Did it help me gain weight, like, from a dangerously low weight to a much, healthier state? Yes. But I saw the insides, and I actually haven't thought about this that much, but I think that was a big contributing factor. And I didn't want to live my life in a hospital. It's not like an elevating environment, you know, in my opinion. I managed gyms. I worked in smaller companies and eventually got into the corporate world. And actually, what you said about naturopathic medicine, you don't think about the East Coast, you think about the West Coast. I never heard of naturopathic medicine growing up. You know, I was in 30 years, lived in New York, between New York and New Jersey. So I wanted to mention that. But to backtrack a moment, yeah, it took me, you know, this winding road through managing gyms and working in smaller companies and making my way into corporate before I just said, I'm not doing this.
Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
bits of that story as well. I've had a couple friends who have been going through health issues in the last couple of years who found their way to naturopathic medicine, who are both native New Yorkers. And I originally got into holistic health exploring through getting exposed to Eastern medicine and Eastern philosophies, traveling outside of the US. And I remember at that time feeling like this is a revolutionary model, coming home and trying to, and I wasn't learning it to teach it. I was just reading books on Ayurveda, Indian medicine, Indian health approaches to nutrition that had this holistic body perspective that I'd never heard of. And as a fitness instructor, someone who just worked in traditional, like, this is the definition of fitness. And even today, when I work with people, I'm always like, let's debunk what your images are of fitness before I start to work with you.
Yeah.
And I remember like being in the car in Queens playing a podcast episode about alternative health to my friend who's a nurse. And her just being like, this is so interesting, but I cannot talk about this in the hospital. Like, I get made fun of for even bringing this up within the hospital when she was starting to do blood work and different things. And so I'm less a part of that right now. I've taken a whole bunch of alternative routes and now surrounded myself with community who does have language for this. But I just wanted to ask how you have found this pathway of naturopathic medicine in a world that maybe is not as open to it yet, and then what it fulfills for you and what you have found in the pursuit of this path.
Yeah. I think, you know, sometimes I realize I'm in a little bit of a bubble, you know, like from the perspective of the places I've lived, right? Like since I started medical school, I started in Arizona, I ended up transferring to California. So, you know, West Coast, like you mentioned. And then I even lived in Canada for 6 months. I lived in Miami, which like all these places are a little bit more open to all these ideas. And I lived in Mexico, like more open, and I'm in Bali, right? Like these are places where people are very open. And not only that, like my world, my social media world is very much like this whole world. So I sometimes forget that it is not common. It is not mainstream. It's getting closer, but it's not there, especially East Coast. Forget it. It's still this like weird animal, it seems like, in the East Coast. Like acupuncture is more common, I would say. And so, but I find
and maybe
that
I should also add, like, for your own definition of it. I realize I'm jumping into like, what's your why and why you're pursuing it. You see people react, but for people who are listening, who don't have exposure to what are we talking about when we're talking about alternative medicine, alternative approaches to health, than just the traditional model, what are we actually talking about?
Well, so naturopathic medicine is a blend of like conventional medicine, it's modern medicine with the holistic modalities, right? Nutrition being a massive piece of it. We're trained in homeopathy, we're trained in manual therapies, so like chiropractic adjustments. We're trained in mind-body medicine, and then it can go in a few different directions. But we have this, I didn't mention botanical medicine, like it's a very vast education, and the idea is we're looking for the root cause, right? We want to know what's really causing, like PMS, for example, like really debilitating PMS. We want to know what's really causing your eczema, or really causing, I don't know, choose a disease to be, choose one, right? We want to know what's the real cause. It's not that you have X symptom and we're going to give you this pill and we're going to call it a day.
Preventive versus responsive medicine.
Yeah. And there is always a case. I like to mention that there is always a place where the meds and the interventions are necessary. But especially when it comes to chronic illness, is where we really shine, because, the pill for ill model really doesn't work for chronic illness, especially if you're not addressing all the lifestyle factors, right? What they're eating, what's in their environment, what are the stresses, are they moving, how are they moving, etc. So it's this combination of worlds that we're putting together that really is like whole person focused.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And when you name that you are exposed to these worlds, that you have gotten to live in the West Coast, in these areas, in Mexico, in Bali, and you might not be as much in this, I would call it an edge. I use the word edge. We're both trained in a space where sexuality coaching was a thing, and in sexuality work and sensuality work, edges are important. In trauma work, edges are important to acknowledge it's not a yes or a no. It's not always a binary, but there's an in-between where you're learning, and the system might be a yes and it might be a no, but you're going to learn about what that edge feels like.
Yes.
And there's different things socially that I also like to think of as edges that we're in collectively. So at this edge here, there's this skepticism around anything non-traditional in medicine. And then there's people who have kind of crossed that edge and are in a place where there's this adaptation of holistic approaches, the recognition of mind and body's interrelationship, and anything else you want to name. What is it that you're noticing across that divide? What did you notice in yourself? What changes have you experienced, and what changes have you experienced or seen in your clients?
I think one of the big things is that people get to this space of there's got to be a different way, right? It's like they've gone through a laundry list of doctors, or they haven't gone to anybody at all because they don't trust them, right? And so those are the two extremes. And so they find their way to me or another naturopathic doctor. And I'm forgetting the entirety of the question.
Really helpful intro. Why someone would even find you? They've already hit their edge of this is not working.
Yeah.
And so my question is, when they do get to that edge, because a lot of us won't hit that edge. We typically do the same. It's the same, just like with emotional work. We're going to do the same pattern over and over and over until we're in enough suffering that it's like, this is not working. And so someone who has found you is at an edge where they've hit their trust level with, or they've tried enough things within the traditional means that are not hitting their chronic, you mentioned the word chronic, their chronic illness, their chronic pain. And so my question is, give us a glimpse. What's on the other side? What are you seeing? What are you seeing for people who hit this edge and go past it, go through it?
One of the things, it brings up one client of mine who came to me, and her world just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller because she had these debilitating headaches and migraines, and no matter what she did, the meds didn't work. She, like, traveling became really, really hard. She wasn't the mom she wanted to be. She was actually a therapist. She wasn't the therapist she wanted to be. And she just had to keep saying no to more and more things because she just was in physical discomfort and physical pain so much of the time. And so as we started to kind of peel back the layers, what we say, it's kind of like a peeling of the onion, right? We're doing blood work, and I'm looking at the blood running more markers than they usually run in the conventional world. I'm looking at the markers in a different way. I discovered a few things, like something called hemochromatosis was iron overload. So we started to deal with that. And we started to look at, even where are her boundaries in her life? What does her nutrition look like? How is she moving? What is she doing for herself? And at the end we worked together 6 months. And at the end of the 6 months, she was like, my life has expanded in a way that I haven't felt in years, right? Like she can travel more comfortably now. She can be out like doing physical work in a way that she wasn't able to. She can show up better for her clients. And it's a game changer. It's like a total, and even like the boundaries she was able to set, where it's like she found this strength in her. And it's amazing. It's amazing to see that, to witness that. So it was really this combination of, let's figure out what's going on in the physiology. Let's really identify how it can support you. And then things just started to fall away.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All of this expanding into, and the concept of the world becoming smaller and smaller. And also want to name that kind of cascading effect where the physical pain, a lot of the work I also do and want to bring light to in this space is the beauty and the value. I'm looking out at snow right now, like the beauty of the body. And when I say the body, I am talking about the human body, and I'm talking about Earth's body. And there's a way in which I use a home as an example, because we have varied ways in which we take care of our body. We have varied opinions about how to take care of the earth, but we know there can be extraordinary variation in how we care for a home. There can be extraordinary variation in what a home is and what care is required. Does it have a yard or not? How many floors does it have? But no matter what, it needs rhythms. It needs rhythms of care for maintenance over time. And what becomes possible in that home completely changes based on those rhythms being met or unmet. And it's not just, oh, I left the room messy or dirty, or I left the dishes out. It's depending on where you live, because I've also lived in warm climates. It's I left the dishes out and now there's an ant infestation. And now there's, like it would be a problem. It's there's rodents. I'm no longer living here alone or living in the cities too. And so that is the power, I believe, also that there's not only the expanding of our own personal worlds, but there's also this expansion in how we can start to relate when we feel comfortable in our physical bodies. When our rhythms in our own beings change, so can our relationship. And then now you get a whole new symbiosis happening where you're getting to be transformed on a much deeper level too, because relationship is such a transformative force. So with that, I'm curious how you found your way into choosing to work on intimacy, choosing to work on empowerment, and just the journey into that, but also, the joy. I want to talk about the joy, and sometimes it can be pain leading there. So, and pain in the, take it away.
So it was multiple factors, as it typically is. One is my journey. Like I mentioned, I was anorexic and whatnot. And, I felt for a long time a disconnect. And I started in personal development work many years ago. And I don't know, over 15 years ago. And what I found with that, it was always very heady. Right. And I still felt this disconnect within myself. Like I would have the knowledge, but I couldn't quite, it was not connecting. It was not landing. And then outside of myself, when I would work with women, I can literally feel the disconnect that they have. And I mean, it is also my belief that women don't end up with reproductive issues just like because they end up with reproductive issues, right? A lot of it is mental, emotional, consciously or subconsciously. And a lot of what I would see is this disconnect with self, especially because, you know, our life and our society is set up so that women don't have a moment, right? Like, because we're so trained to go, 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 do, achieve, 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 like in the same way men are, but we're not little men to just like go in that rhythm and go in that pace, like you mentioned, rhythms. And so I see women, a lot of women that comes to me, there's just this disconnect with themselves. They can't hear themselves. They can't feel their bodies. There's like a numbness. And, you know, I would be working with them and we would get to a certain point and they would be doing much, much better. But there would be like that, there's a wall they can't get through. And especially because I got into personal development work many years ago, my passion is like transformation. I want to see people's lives transform. I want to see, like, I want to see it in their body, see it in their soul, see it in their being, just because it's been also a passion of mine. And that's how I ended up in the intimacy work. And there were still a lot of things for me to heal and address that I didn't have the tools, and I wanted the tools for myself and for the women I work with.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And there is so many different avenues and conversations that could continue to happen in this space. But what I envision for you as someone who's blending or bringing together these worlds is that you will be a conversation starter of many conversations moving forward. And what are the conversations that you want to be starting? What are the both either conversations you want to be starting or paths that you want to see or ways that you want to serve as you feel these two beautiful, distinct, and overlapping needs in the world of holistic health and intimacy on a deeply holistic I call it holistic sexuality, identity level?
Yeah. That's a really great question.
Not
You
to
know,
have the answer right now, but
what do I want to, what is the conversation? I mean, for me, it always comes back to the desire for women to literally stop hating on themselves. I tend to say for them to stop kicking the shit out of themselves. Like, I've done it. I did it for many, 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 many years. My clients come to me and it's in their language and it's in their bodies. And, you know, for me, the conversation is what if you actually stepped into self-love, which is not a monumentally new conversation, right? You know, the self-love conversation is like, it's all over the place. But what if you actually did that? It didn't just live in the ethers of the world as a concept. What does it mean? What does it look like? How would that transform your life? How would it transform your health? And this whole idea of like, there's literally nothing fundamentally wrong with you. Like, you're perfect as you truly are, perfect as you are. Even if you don't feel it, even if you feel sick every day, even if you're not where you want to be in life, you know, like I'm moving through all of those things. And if I have found a profound love for myself, I believe every other woman can find a profound love for themselves, even in the shit, right? Like, even when things are just not right, per se.
yeah, I wonder also, it's such a personal topic, the space of eating disorders. And just because it is a road that you have walked through or along, what wisdom or encouragement do you have for young women in this place? And I also want to take the moment also to acknowledge how the suicide rate is rising in young women for the last 3 years, specifically teenagers as well. And so this is not a small issue. And also want to name the just a conversation that I'm passionate about, which that you mentioned, is how devastatingly toxic a fitness or health culture that is based upon like regulation and this very much more masculine approach to just doing it and going to the gym and do the thing, and did you do the weight, and did you get out of bed, which at times is a necessary mindset because we need balance in life, but does not address, if the root causes are not being met, how this culture of self-responsibility, when these core emotional wounds or traumas have not been addressed, really locks someone into their space rather than frees them. And I don't know exactly what the journey looks like, but the reason my coaching is liberatory love is this recognition, that liberation, or belief in rather, greater liberation within one's spirit, soul, energy, essence, whatever names you want to put on it, the deeper dimensions of psyche that we can't quantify perfectly, exists within you. So yeah, I just want to ask about what encouragement or wisdom you have toward people who are going through the darkness of self-mutilation in any way, or a challenged relationship with their body.
Yeah. One, that there is a way through, because it can feel like there isn't a way through. But it does take patience and grace. And I believe a deep, deep desire to live and live fully. And on some level, give up suffering. Yeah. And that it truly, it's it's often about control or not, or feeling a lack of control, or not feeling seen, not feeling heard, not feeling loved, not feeling valued, all those things, right? Finding somebody that can offer that to you is hugely important. Also helping you discover, yes, we have our part of our job, part of our responsibility is to find safety within ourselves, but truly finding someone that can help you feel safe, or multiple people that help you feel safe along the journey. But in knowing it's a response for a deeper need, and not to forget that, not to forget that.
Thank you.
And
as come to, I think of all these spaces as like that we always end at the beginning, or yeah. I intentionally hold these spaces to be, I want new action, new way of being, new way of thinking, or new way of doing. Could be all three, but could be one of those things, because all of those are going to be necessary for shifted relationship to suffering. I want shifted relationship to being, feeling, doing, thinking, to feel like at the edge of these environments. I don't really have interest in just talking for the sake of talking. Our world has enough of that.
Right, totally.
Called Elegance Lab for a reason. Elegance is this embodiment of something radically different than what is. And there's philosophy in that too. And because some of the things you're talking about are a bit philosophical, I would love to invite just a little bit of room to have you share from your own, could be anything, but your own like spiritual or philosophical journey toward life itself, and how this has either evolved through your process of working with the body, or informed your relationship of working with the body and with people, or both?
I think we're the deepest place or the most significant place where the spiritual kind of thread that's been running through my life, probably since like 25 is when it started, which is quite a while now, is the trust, right? You know, in spiritual practices, it's about trust. It's about surrender. It's about letting go. It's about letting the universe or the divine or God or whatever, you know, whichever word you resonates with you, to guide. And that ultimately has been such a powerful tool to help me move through my health challenges, but also make the choices and take me literally around the world and back to live the life I'm living. But it is that absolute trust. And it wasn't always absolute trust. It was like, okay, I got it. This is what I need to do. And then, you put up like a fight like no other. So it's a practice, right? But it was truly coming into relationship with the universe and divine, which is something I'm still working on. I don't want to claim to be any great, great channel, great, spiritual, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but that connection is real and the trust is real. And what it has done as taken away anxiety that I used to experience, because I know my back, the universe has my back. Yeah.
Not easy.
Not easy. Not easy. Not easy work.
Yeah. And there's two things that I want to maybe leave people with. When you're in a place of suffering, it is so challenging to trust and also to reach out for help and also to believe that there is help beyond what you're seeing. And so I want to ask it first. I guess here's the two parts of the question as related to this. On a practical level, what would you point people toward, like in the practical way of, I actually want to get help for my body? Should they find a naturopathic doctor? Is there a place they can go online? Is there something to start researching, looking up just to get them exposed? Or what do you think on a practical level help looks like? And then on a more emotional or philosophical, spiritual level, what have you actually witnessed in the power of trust that makes it a worthy thing to do when it feels so risky? But I don't want to trust. I don't want to let go.
Well, as far as, where does somebody start with naturopathic medicine? I mean, you can literally just Google naturopathic medicine and start reading about it. Understand, get a sense of what it's about. You can find me online, message me if you want to have a deeper conversation. But one of the main organizations is the AANP, American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. You can go to their website and you can start reading about it and start understanding the depth of it, because it's really, in its very fundamentals, it's powerful medicine. And yeah, it's a kind of a great way to start. And then as far as practical steps to trust, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a story just from my past. And that was, I had started medical school in Arizona. I knew Arizona was not the right place for me, but and I was accepted to school in California. I really wanted to be in California. But laundry list of reasons. These are the logical reasons to go to Arizona. And I was crying. I was like in pain. I was like crying my eyes out. I remember when I sent the email saying, I'm not going to California. I accepted the acceptance from Arizona. Arizona was like 3 of the hardest years of my life. And it led me down a path of major anxiety and panic. I managed to always pass my classes, but what happened was, as I withdrew from the school, and I'm looking at life and I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? I'm now back to where I started when I left corporate America, because I'm 2.5 years through this program and I haven't finished. What do I do? And it was on a whim. It was like in a moment, I got like the message of just apply to the school in California. And it was like everything just lined up. Everything just lined up. And it was, if I would have thought about it, and I still do these things, right? Like you think about it, you have the thought, but then you don't act and like nothing happens. But I had the thought and I acted, and suddenly I was able to get to California and my whole system just went. Now it took a lot of months and still a lot of anxiety to like make it come like fully into fruition, to get myself out of Arizona and into California and all the logistics that went around with that. But it's not to second guess those moments of clarity. And we all feel them differently, right? Maybe you feel it in your chest. Maybe you feel it in your gut. Maybe you feel it, right? We all feel it differently, but to trust it and then act, move, like just go, because it's those moments that can be the most decisive.
Beautiful. I want to name that also as we come to, thank you for sharing that. As we come to a close, one of the things that I'm working on outside of my coaching in femininity, relationships, sexuality, sensuality, the area where we overlapped in is digital wellness, digital health, because I really have this concern for people being in touch with their bodies, and I'm trained as a user experience designer, so I'm uniquely aware of the level of power within the designs of the websites and apps that use our attention every single day. And I decided to call that organization Thrive because, well, originally I was like playing with all these digital wellness. If you're in this space, usually like digital wellness, digital well-being. And then I was like, well-being and wellness isn't really using the word that I want to use. Because I want someone to be well, but I want your life to be radiant. I want radiance.
Yes.
Of just going to the gym or becoming a yogi, like actually having a practice that is connecting your whole being. And so I just want to, as we close, leave room for, I asked you before we came about some force, some energy, some person that has helped inspire the journey. And we were talking a little bit about Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance and possibility. And what does abundance and possibility have to do with this whole conversation?
It's because the way I see it is, whenever I think about possibility, is it truly anything's possible. Like we're not stuck in one way, shape, or form of doing things. And I think that's where we get stuck. Right. And it's kind of like how people are like, oh my gosh, you're living in Bali, like, oh my gosh. And I said, yeah, because I saw other possibilities. What are the other possibilities? It means like everything's at your fingertips, even if it's like can be hard to get there initially. It's all literally at your fingertips. And abundance of energy, abundance of joy, abundance of love, of abundance of ecstasy, right? And for me, I used to think of abundance of around wealth, and yes, abundance of wealth, we want that too, but it's just like this high vibe, high energy. Like you were saying, radiance. I want radiance in the world. And it's that this is all available. And sometimes I find we forget because we get so stuck, especially with like the way the world is right now. We get stuck like this, right? Tunnel vision, that we can't see the possibilities, that we can't see the abundance, but it's there. It's there.
And our bodies also get to be the place
Yes.
of recognition and reclamation. It's not
Yes.
just a waiting until the next thing comes or the thing that we think we need arrives. It's actually
Yes.
beginning to connect with this magical, delightful essence that we are, that is not just an essence or an imagined force, but also a physical, lived being that we reside in.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, like the wisdom of our bodies is so profound, and it's like being able to give the space to the wisdom for it to like literally deal with what we need to deal with versus like shoving it down or trying to put a band-aid on it. Like when the wisdom can actually come up and be given space, the body does miraculous things.
Beautiful. And I feel also the desire to just name, if you've been listening to this conversation and noticing that you're tuning in and tuning out, this can also be the body's response to, I'm not ready yet, or I don't know, or I don't feel safe even hearing or talking about this yet. And I want to echo a principle that has been so paramount in our studies this past year, which is that our being is always doing the best thing that it believes is possible, or will most protect us now. And so I just want to offer this to our women listeners, especially. Be so gentle with yourself, be so loving to yourself, be so kind to yourself. We are not in a place that is separate than you. Your thriving, your abundance, your radiance, your well-being, your love, your power, your passion is so well within your being. And there are forces all around you that have made it challenging to see and accept that. There are things you could not have controlled that have made it difficult to see and accept that. And your body at this moment is truly doing the best job that it can to keep you safe right now. And its best tactics are not its only tactics. And so I just want to thank you, Eva, for that reminder, that possibility exists, and just this inkling. If there's anything to trust, if trust of thriving isn't here yet, trust of there's another possibility. I don't know what it is, but there's something else other than same shapes I'm taking every day, the same thoughts I'm thinking every day, the same feelings I'm having every day, even if I have felt them for 365 days. And it is only 17 days into this new year. So I feel so grateful that this is our opening conversation to the year. And I would love to just name a couple of the places that people can best get in contact with you.
Yeah. Well, one is Instagram at Dr.Eva Yacobi. Yes, Dr. Eva Yacobi. Also, I just launched a new website, which is drevayacobi.com. Those are the main places currently. So I'd love to connect, and please reach out to me. Feel free to ask me any questions. Don't be shy. But those are the two primary places right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva, so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Amazing conversation.
And listeners and viewers, we are in this journey with you. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Mm-hmm.